Appreciate it, guys. And thanks for guys for giving us this time. We're excited to be able to kind of go through, like Benazir said, it's the topic that we continue to hear over and over from a lot of clients, and we thought it would be a good one to start with. We're going to do a series of these with IBI, partnered together in some things that we're both seeing, and wanted to make sure that we kind of jumped in and something I think that is applicable to everybody, and something I think that everybody kind of faces on a day-to-day basis. And the title of this is something that we kind of all came up with that we thought was kind of clever. What are ugly dashboards? And before we jumped into that, though, I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit and introduce that topic and what it means. And just the way of doing that, that's just something we kind of said over and over again. Don't call my baby ugly. And to be honest with you, I've heard this from clients over and over again. Or if it's somebody we're talking to about somebody else's dashboard, they're saying, "Hey, don't call their dashboard ugly. It's theirs." Ugly is such a bad term, number one. And it's such a subjective term, and we'll talk a little bit about that because it is true. What somebody may think is ugly, somebody else may think is beautiful. So for us to kind of understand and set the tone for the rest of this, I wanted to kind of go into what makes beautiful analytics. So the opposite of ugly would be beautiful. So what makes for a beautiful analytics application? So before that, I wanted to kind of talk about what it's not. And the first thing that most people would think of is, hey, a beautiful application is something that looks pretty. And, in our opinion, it is not pretty pictures. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't be pretty. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive to have very attractive looking applications like the one we put screenshot on here. It's the one we're proud of. We worked with the client to be able to put something very similar to this together that we feel like does look very aesthetic. This is something they're going to put in front of their client. So aesthetics were important here. But that's not what would make this type of application a beautiful application. The beauty comes into whether or not we're getting our message across. So what we put in here is a pretty picture that relays their own message and fails to engage the audience. That's our definition of ugly. So not a pretty picture, but if we're not really getting our message across and it's not getting what we get to the audience the way we need to, then we don't feel like it's a beautiful product. It's not about visualizations, although visualizations are very important. Choosing the right ones is something that we want to talk about some more in a follow-up presentation soon. It's not whether we're doing self-service or digging into visual discovery and allowing our people to be able to do some really cool things there. It's not about whether or not you have data science in it, whether or not you understand how to apply ML and AI to what you're doing. It's not about the data as far as IoT and big data, whether or not what types of data you're pulling to, although those are extremely important, and ugly data can definitely make for an ugly application no matter what your intentions are. It's not a factor of how cognitive the application is, although again, it's something that we feel like really helps, especially if you're putting this in front of clients that are paying for this. It's something that you do need to look at. That's not, in our opinion, what truly makes a beautiful application. In the end, what it is to us is it's something that is focused on the user value that they get from it. Does it provide some value to your users from all the data that they're pulling in? They've got to get some type of value, and when I say some, not meaning the measure of it, but some measure of something that they're trying to get from this. It has to communicate oftentimes complex ideals in a very clear and precise manner. If you cannot get across your point, and you have too much complexity in it, you're not going to have your goals. Your clients aren't going to get what your goals were for them to get from it. And it has to tell the truth about the data, and that goes into whether or not you have beautiful or ugly data, which is another topic that we'll talk about later on. What kind of value are you trying to get? Typically, most people will look at it and say, we need it to be actionable, and that is very true. In most cases, you want to have data that is actionable. You want to have some type of visualization that tells you what I need to do next, or where do I need to drill in to find why things are where they are. It needs to be relevant to what I'm trying to their job. So if I give very good information to someone, but it's not something that applies to them, then it really doesn't matter. It's got to be timely. If it's old data or something that they can't do anything about now, then what does it matter? It's got to be measurable, and it's got to be properly displayed. Again, Benazir is going to talk a lot about that part of it. How to display your data, how to be able to have best practices around that. But all that does definitely go into helping ensure that you are getting the value across to your users that you're trying to get to them. 4 types of dashboards that again, we won't go into very detailed right now, but They can be in very many phases of it. It can be conceptual. It could be, like if you're at a mall and you look at the placard that tells you you are here and it tells you where to go. It's kind of a conceptual dashboard telling you where to go to where you get to where you need to go. There's no data involved in that. It's just basically a map. Data-driven means you're getting data and you're helping people understand what's in that data. It can be declarative, telling you something that you need to know, or it can be exploratory, giving you the option to be able to find what you want from it. And again, depending on what you're doing, you'll look at this and kind of see what your goal is and where you're trying to go with this. It can be descriptive, it can be predictive or prescriptive. And that's kind of the way we think of things. And this is a lot of times it's a progression. People will start off with a dashboard or an application that tells them what they have going on, and they can kind of dig further into that. Then a lot of times they'll start looking into doing predictive things, using AI and some other tools to be able to help predict what's going to happen off that based on models or different things like that. And then the next step, is taking that to another step and saying, not only is this what we think it's going to be, but this is what you should do with it. These are the types of actions that you should take. So it's trying to prescribe actions for you to take on that. So again, there's lots of options here, lots of things that we want to look at when we get into here. But again, we've got to be able to make sure that we're showing value all along. So how do we find value? The simplest thing is just to talk to your users, understand what they're doing, understand the challenges they face. We've put together questionnaires that even allow you to be able to give them to them to help them figure out those things themselves and have conversations with them based upon that. We always like to kind of go at it from the who, what, when, where, and how. Who's going to be looking at this? What are they trying to get from this? When do they need to be able to see this? Is this something that's daily, monthly, up to the minute or second? Where are they going to be able to look at this? Is this something they see on a laptop? Is this something they see on their mobile phone, or maybe a display that you put on? And how are they going to use this? The how is very important because you want to understand the kind of the workflow of what they're going to do with it. So you're providing the value to them all along to make sure that they can do what they want to with it. And to figure that out, a lot of times we go to different things, but you want to understand what are your corporate goals, visions, and competitive advantages. Usually the best place to start. What is your company? What is the core competencies that they have that you need to be able to support with this? What is their vision statement? So how is the visualizations, how is the analytics we're putting from them to helping drive the vision for our company and where it's going to go? When we're looking at sales or marketing or whatever, how is that driving us to be able to help make happier customers or whatever our core competencies are in our company? So being able to tie it back to something like that is extremely valuable. And that's where these things get to be extremely, extremely useful to your clients and for your organization as well. A good way that we always like to talk to sales, and salespeople will tell you how your company is being sold to other people. And you've got to be able to understand those values to be able to support that. And it doesn't mean that you're just creating application for salespeople, but it's understanding how they're talking to other people about the company that you work at or the things that you're doing. One thing that I really like this chart, I got a couple in here from this Good Charts book from Scott Bernardo. This is a good way to kind of measure what you're doing, what you're looking at. And this is for Good Charts, but to me, this fits for just general analytics, period. You obviously want to be up in that right-hand corner from both from a design perspective. You want to be able to understand, am I designing this thing in a way that my user is going to get to what they want to? And that doesn't mean that it has to be the glossiest picture. It doesn't mean that it has to be, just like that application we showed you, at the very beginning. It doesn't have to have pretty icons in it, but it does have to have a design to help you figure out where you're going to take them. And you want to make sure that it's contextual with the things that are around it, that you're giving them context to be able to understand what they're trying to do. Again, this is something we could spend all day on, but this is something that we use quite a bit to help us understand, if the things that we're creating are doing what we're wanting to do. Make sure it sticks. So this is where we talk about, all these things, that what it is, the value we're getting from it, but how do we actually do these things? One of the things that I like to do, and everybody hears this term, it's way overblown, but develop best practices along the way. So that way, when you're putting something together, whether it's an analyst who's working with the data or it's your developer who's creating something, they have something that they know, I use this template with this style sheet and these type of things to help make sure, or I know that when I go into it, I think about things in this way to make sure we're getting the value we have. Empower people to be creative. Again, I would make sure that they have some best practices in place for that, so they aren't being too creative and making things that are hard to understand. But people have to be creative. This is a very creative way of being able to get ideals to people. Create processes around it. I think this may be one of the more important ones. Is if you have a process for how you handle a project and when those people are involved that can help you do this, then that will be the primary thing that will drive these things on a consistent basis. And be a nerd. Study the science. Again, for some of your people, there's going to be business analysts who aren't going to want to have to dig into this stuff on a daily basis. But for some people, this is what they do on a daily basis. So, read articles on the internet, read or listen to podcasts. There's tons of stuff out there that you can do. But be a nerd in the stuff. Understand it. It is a science, so there's no just complete formula for how you do this. Engagement and project process. Again, we talked about this just a second ago. The biggest question that always comes from this is, okay, so if we develop a process, when does design need to be a part of that? And the most part that I would tell you, the biggest part is make sure that you're bringing them in at the beginning. A lot of people wait till the end to say, okay, we've got all this stuff together now, let's make this look pretty, or let's make sure we apply these things to make sure we can see it. If you don't start with the right picture at the very beginning, it's hard to catch up. So this is kind of an example of ours that we use, or a version of ours at a very high level. We do a lot of stuff from just understanding the business as cases that we're going to be taking on, use cases. And we have our team that's going to be working on those types of things involved there. They're usually the ones leading the sketching, the wireframing, the client reviews. So that first part is key to making sure they're involved. And then have normal checkpoints, whether it's, before you go to user acceptance testing or just unit testing, and then obviously a final review. But I would say, a stress from this, make sure that you get them involved in the very beginning and that they're involved in some capacity throughout. But typically it's going to be heavier at the beginning.